joining my show. It's nice hearing from those of you who have contacted me. It's really a nice feeling being in a community and knowing that people are appreciating getting some solid information. And I've never professed to know it all, but I just try to share what I know so that we can all be just a little bit healthier. Well, today I'm going to speak about another subject that's sort of near and dear to my heart, called Syndrome X. Better known as insulin resistance, promotes body fat gain and chronic degenerative disease and aging. And most of us are so concerned with aging that we're looking for any fast tip, whether it be makeup or a particular pill or a shot, that they think one thing is going to make you stop the aging process. The only thing that stops the aging process is taking responsibility for your health on a cellular level, find out where you're nutrient deficient, build your body up, and you'll be surprised, not only will you look and feel better, but automatically you're saving yourself as far as the aging process is concerned. So, insulin resistance has reached epidemic proportions in America, and you've probably read about it in many magazines and even know people who are dealing with it. Insulin resistance is caused by the body's inability to make the most of the food that they eat. While insulin resistance tends to develop in everyone over the course of a normal aging process, it's become a major health issue because it is now occurring in younger and younger people all the time. I'm seeing it in my practice, so I can imagine throughout the country what's going on. While it's more common for a 90-year-old person to be insulin resistant, it should not be occurring in 1 out of 3 individuals, sometimes as young as 25 years old. Let me give you some symptoms of insulin resistance. Often feeling tired when you shouldn't be tired, in particular after you eat. Gaining a few pounds and having difficulty losing the excess weight. Most of us can relate to that one. Noticing steadily rising cholesterol. And I think on my next show I'll be talking about cholesterol and my feelings on that. So keep watching. And high blood pressure levels. And most people don't discuss how insulin and high blood pressure has anything to do with one another. They automatically just start taking drugs. And on another show I probably will be discussing blood pressure and my feelings about that. Well, the final stage of insulin resistance is onset diabetes. They call it adult onset diabetes, also known as type 2 diabetes, which now affects over 15 million Americans. It's just awful. And even if an insulin-resistant individual does not become diabetic, it doesn't mean they will avoid negative consequences. Some individuals experience only minor symptoms from insulin resistance, and others really suffer greatly. Ultimately, when insulin acts appropriately, it results in food cravings, which eventually can lead to obesity and heart disease. And very, very many people are not properly tested. You know, so you'll go to your doctor and you're overweight, and they'll just say, well, lose weight. Well, okay, how do I lose weight for me? And that's sort of another issue, and we'll be talking a lot about that in future shows. But I want to stay with the subject, which is the role of insulin. Insulin is the body's master fuel supply hormone, which controls the body's chemical processes. And after we eat, insulin hormone is released by the pancreas and secretes into the bloodstream. Insulin directs the movement of digestion of foods into the blood cells and affects how the food is going to be used. A lot of people think, oh, gee, I ate a good meal, so I'm getting nutrition out of it. Not necessarily so, and I'm going to keep telling you to go back and watch my show on food combining. You'll understand that better. The main function of insulin hormone is to regulate blood sugar levels by directing it into the cells. So this decreases blood sugar levels, thereby protecting the brain and other vital organs from the damage due to receiving too much sugar. Insulin acts directly on central nervous system regulators, serving an intermediary and communicating the need to eat and to stop eating. Most of us don't know why we keep eating and eating and eating, and I've met people who say they've never felt full, which is sort of scary. Even though I got to 311 pounds, I still would eat and probably overeat, but gosh, I knew when I was already full, even though sometimes I'd eat more than what I really needed because it was on the plate. And probably a lot of you can relate to that. So let me explain the normal insulin process, because if you understand this, maybe you'll understand why boy, I've tried this diet and that diet, and I lose, and then I don't lose, and I can't lose, and you're so frustrated with yourself. When the process is functioning properly, glucose levels in the blood change in response to a wide variety of events, but always remain within set limits. The pancreas of the normal eater releases just enough insulin to support the person's nutritional needs. The receptors allow the cells to receive the right amount of glucose. The insulin helps convert the proper amount of blood glucose into glycogen. So, changes in the brain chemistry are also clued in, leading to the sensation of satisfaction. The ratio of insulin to glucose changes gradually. And I think it was interesting when I found out at a seminar many years ago when I was just learning, like some of you right now, that it takes 20 minutes for the for the stomach to tell the brain that you're full. So can you imagine if you started just eating slower and waiting, you'd know you were full more quickly, because after that 20 minutes, you're getting more calories and maybe the wrong kind of food than you need. But insulin also controls the distribution and use of both glucose and fat, determining how much fat the body accumulates. Insulin opens numerous receptors within the cells and unloads blood sugar to fuel the cells within the body. So, however, when insulin is unstable to act exactly as nature intended, it adversely affects the use and storage of blood sugar and fat. Insulin resistance. Insulin resistance results when too much insulin is in the blood for too long. Get a pad, write this down because it'll really make sense to you. Insulin resistance results when too much insulin is in the blood too long. At this point, the cells change, making it so less insulin is able to enter into the cell. Insulin normally facilitates the entry of serum glucose to the cells and to the tissue. The longer the levels of insulin remain high, the greater the decrease in the number of insulin receptor sites. So, glucose facilitated by the insulin takes a different route and is converted to glycogen and triglycerides via the liver. Now remember, the triglycerides, those are our fat cells. Now I have every fat cell I had at 311 pounds, but doing the right thing, I've been able to shrink them out so that I don't put weight back on again. So during the early phases of insulin resistance, insulin is ineffective because it can't get where it's supposed to go and effectively do what it's supposed to do. The more sugar an individual consumes, the less effective insulin becomes, because the body's cells have to protect themselves from being overcome by too much glucose. So you're getting the picture now of how sugar affects your body. And too much insulin leads to insulin resistance. So watch the carbohydrates. Insulin resistance can be linked to diets and contain too much carbohydrates, especially of simple sugars. And most of you probably know that already. And as we age, our metabolic process slows down, and the body doesn't need as many carbohydrates for energy as it did when we were younger. And years of eating high carbohydrate diets translates into years of accumulating excess sugar levels in the body. The cells become so filled with sugar over the years that they can't admit any more sugar molecules. What happens next is that the number of insulin receptors in the cells reduce so that the insulin is unable to unload as much sugar. Get it? We're getting fatter and fatter. Hyperinsulinism results from too much insulin in the bloodstream. And this is why when people come in on my basic panel, I do 5 tests just for sugar alone. I mean, my basic panel runs about 120 tests, but it takes that many just to really see the whole picture. That's when the cells respond to the excess insulin levels by locking even more insulin receptor doors, which leads to further insulin resistance. The extra sugar is now diverted into fat production. Hello, are we getting it now? Now is in the next chapter to our health profile. After the fat cells become filled, the sugar is forced to remain in the bloodstream because it has nowhere to go. So, that insulin resistance has now graduated into type 2 diabetes. Now, isn't that scary? Now we know the process, it just didn't happen overnight. And this could be happening over years, but if the right blood work isn't being done so that you can follow what's happening, you could show a normal glucose or normal insulin and still be having problems, because the insulin level can be normal. It could go all the way high, it could go all the way low, and by the time you maybe went to a doctor, it could show that it's normal, but in fact, you have a sugar problem. Let's talk about the chromium connection. Body cells need insulin to keep working properly, and insulin needs chromium to keep working effectively. It is possible for insulin to do the job without chromium, but when chromium is present in ample quantities, insulin works much more effectively. Scientists at the USDA have discovered that diets high in carbohydrates cause people to excrete more chromium through their urine. So it's something that I use a lot of chromium, and you have to know the right kind of chromium and what should balance with each other. You know, I always get concerned mentioning a product because I think people say, oh, well, I got to go get some chromium. And you don't know what you're getting, what the source is.